Welcome to VIR. Actually, welcome to the NNJR class in advance of our driving on track on the 29th through the 31st of October. This class is designed for student drivers, that is those in green, yellow, and blue, but there are tips and advice here that will benefit all drivers regardless of experience. My objective and the club's objective in these classes is to give you at least one or two tips or ideas that can not only help you drive better, but help you have more fun when you come to our events. My name is Bill Gilbert. I'm one of NNJR's chief instructors. I will see you at VIR so you can ask me questions, but today we're going to dive right in and talk about two topics. We're going to talk about doing the basics well on track, and then we will shift gears and talk about VIR turn by turn. We'll do a walk around the track virtually, I guess is one way to think about it. So with that said, let's dive right into some slides. These slides are also available on the website. As I said, the topic today is do the basics well. It comes with the normal disclaimer that driving on track is fundamentally dangerous and you're responsible for your own safety. Despite everything we do to try to help everyone be safe, there are no guarantees in this sport, as I'm sure you all know. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about why the basics matter, what we mean by basics, or at least some of them, and most importantly, how to improve. So why do we focus on the basics? Well, I think Ross Bentley has put it the best. He said, the basics, he says it the other way around. The advanced stuff is just doing the basics better. So in other words, you're not going to get better without improving on the basics. And I've seen that illustrated many times over, as I'm sure many of you have. And Ross goes on to say, you focus on the basics, you commit to learning, and you prepare. And I'm going to sound like a broken record on several of those points. And importantly, when you're working on the basics, we want to practice in a deliberate way, a focused way. And the best drivers want to learn more. They're learning sponges, and anything you can do beforehand is going to help you when you get to the track. Another way to think about this is the big idea is there is no single big idea. This is from a different source, but a well-vetted source. Progress is the sum of many small improvements. So any gain we make and can repeat is excellent progress. As we get better, the gains get smaller, but they're still there. That's why those of us that have been driving for years come back to the track. Not only is it fun, but we continuously find small ways, if you have a lot of experience, to get better. So what do we mean by the basics? Well, this could be a very long list, and it's probably longer than it should be even for this purpose, but here's the ones we're going to briefly talk about, except I don't have a slide on consistency because that really underpins all of these, and we'll say more about that in a minute. But let's start with the basics. We have to be seated properly in the car. We have to be comfortable. We have to have good control of the steering wheel, and so on. Your instructor will work with you on this if you're new to the track, or if you don't think you're properly seated with enough bend in the elbow, bend in the knee, and so on. And if you're at all uncomfortable in the car, that's a bad sign and something to ask your instructor to help you with. Mirrors are a big deal. We need to be able to see the cars around us. Most people have them adjusted incorrectly, as you've heard me say before, if you've listened to these sessions. Set the rearview mirror pretty much the way you normally would, except to make sure you can see as far behind as possible. But then the left mirror, we're going to push it out. If we rest our head, we turn our head, and we put it against the driver's window and push that left mirror all the way out until we can just barely see the back corner of the car. And I mean just barely, with our head tipped over. Then if we put our head straight up, obviously we're not going to see the car in the mirror. And we do the same thing on the right side by leaning our head under the rearview mirror and pushing that mirror out. When we do that, instead of having a big blind spot on the side of the car, like you see in this diagram, you either don't have a blind spot at all, or it's very small. And in my experience, almost all cars can be have the mirrors adjusted, so there are no blind spots, especially Porsches. So this is really important on the track. It's equally important, frankly, on the highway. So you should have all of your vehicles with their mirrors adjusted this way, but start on the track if you haven't done it with your road cars. So here's some questions to ask yourself, about seating and getting ready to go on track. Are you comfortable in the car? Can you easily see, in front, behind, both sides? Do you have good control with your shoes? Can you, do they not slip, but at the same time, don't get hung up? How about your hands? Do you need gloves? Do your hands get sweaty? Do you have a good grip of the steering wheel? Pretty basic stuff. But if you're new to the track, or if for some reason you're not comfortable, ask yourself these questions and make sure you are comfortable. Now, when we're on track, again, this is basic stuff, but if you're new, this is important. We use reference points to drive a consistent line, because the line is really the first important part of getting driving on track done correctly. And we all know the line is determined by where we get on the brakes, where we turn in, where there's typically a cone, the apex or center of the corner, where there's also typically a cone, and then track out, where there is sometimes, but not always, a cone, especially at VIR. So when we're on track, there's kind of this rhythm, right? We accelerate, we brake, we turn, and that rhythm repeats. Sometimes we brake more, sometimes less, sometimes it might even just be a lift, but that's the rhythm that we want to get used to on the track. And the line really has to become second nature. We have to have a mental picture. Here you've got a photograph of the line with several cars, more or less on the proper line. You need to have that mental picture in your head. And so let's think about the sequence in which we learn the line. We first kind of have to get a picture in our head of which corner is coming up next. If we just exited turn, turn 4 at VIR, do we know what's coming up right away with turn 5, and so on. And that starts with memorizing the corner numbers and names, and then kind of being able to describe it. And you can do a lot of this preparation in advance if you're new to a track or new to the track, new to driving on track. So once we have that mastered, now we hopefully have a clear mental picture of each corner. What does it look like? Can I sit in my easy chair, or can I sit in my car in the paddock and visualize, that is, have a mental picture of how to drive each corner? That's next after we memorize the names and numbers. We have to get that clear mental picture. Am I using the full width of the track? If I'm not having to unwind the wheel as I accelerate, and I'm pinching, or I'm otherwise just using part of the track, we have to get used to using the full width of the track, and that will become second nature. And then finally, am I consistent in each corner? And this is something even advanced drivers, don't struggle with, but they work on, because, to get consistent, meaning turning in at exactly the same point, apexing the same point, and so on. If you've got some experience, this is not as easy as it sounds. One of the things that can help with consistency is more reference points. Look for tire marks, look for cracks, look for seams, look for sealer, look for things that can give you a visual or or even a feel reference. If the curb, if you brush the curb at an apex, you can feel it when you get there. So adding reference points as you get more experience is really important. Controls, pretty obvious, right? The steering, the gas, the brakes, that's what we have to help guide the car around the track. You're going to hear your instructor use terms like wind the wheel in, wind the steering in, don't jerk it in, unwind as you're accelerating and the front end needs to do less work. Squeeze the gas pedal, release the brakes. And we never want to rush. Notice those terms all convey doing something in a nice, gentle, controlled manner. Except in an emergency, there is never any time on the track we want to rush. And I mean gear shifts. I mean, even though I'm going to talk in a minute about how to use the brakes and to use them aggressively, it doesn't mean jumping on them, and it doesn't mean rushing to do it. Common mistake students make is to feel like they have to do even an upshift in a hurry, like from third to fourth. Don't do that. Take your time with the shift. It'll actually get faster if you do it gently and smoothly. Our hands want to be placed at 9 and 12 for most people. How smoothly and how much we turn the steering wheel is something to pay attention to. Some drivers naturally kind of wind the wheel in nicely and unwind it. Others tend to kind of jerk the wheel in. But even if they don't do that, some drivers turn the wheel more quickly and some turn it more slowly. And that makes a difference. As you get more experience, you will find in some corners, you do need to turn the wheel quickly. In other corners, you want to turn it more slowly. So it's not just a matter of where our hands are, it's a matter of how we use that steering wheel. A tip about braking. Your heel should be resting on the floor, and it should stay there whether your foot's on the gas pedal or the brake pedal. And the ball of your foot should be on the right foot should be on the gas pedal, and that way we can lean the left side of the foot over to the brakes, for heel and toe. But this is the proper position for your foot, your right foot in the car. Braking. If we're in a heavy braking zone, for example, going into turn 1 at the end of the front straight at VIR, it's a perfect example of a heavy braking zone. Well, we could be smooth and gentle to get on the brakes and then just come off the brakes. That's obviously not the right idea, although it's what many students do. This brake trace looks exactly like what many students do at the beginning of their driving career. Now, you could just get on the brakes at the last possible moment, use full braking force and then jump off the pedal. That upsets the car mightily, so it's not a good idea. Here's what we want the brake trace to look like. We want to get on full brake force quickly, but not suddenly, if you understand the difference. By which I mean, we're going to move our foot quickly from the gas pedal to the brake pedal. We're going to push, we're going to feel resistance, and then we're just going to push that pedal right to the floor so that we get that nice steep line and we get up near the full brake force line that you see at the top here. This dash line, that's that's as fast as, well, it's just past where the car wants to be, as the green line shows here. If we lock the wheels, not a good idea. Even if we have ABS, we're losing brake force. But pay a particular attention here to the slope of the line coming off the brakes. That's a substantial portion of the brake zone, and it's a gradual decline. That is what we all strive to do when we come off the brakes. So hence the term brake release or soft brake release is really an important technique. And by the way, it's equally important for advanced drivers. Pros practice how good they are or not at brake release. If we're doing less braking, meaning we don't need to brake full on, like perhaps for turn 10 at South Bend at VIR, then we do something like the red line here, where it's a brush of the brakes, because we don't want the heavy brake to upset the car, or even a medium brake where we're not on full brake very long. We're still going to, gently release the brakes. So the blue line and the green line here, are more or less the same as for the brake release itself. So here's some questions to ask yourself about braking. Am I consistent? Use a 1 to 10 scale, for 10 being full on and 0 being no brake, and rate yourself. Am I getting to a 9? When I need, when I'm braking for turn 1, and then am I gradually coming off? Kind of 3, 2, 2, 1.5, 1, a half, a quarter, 0 as I come off. Do I have a consistent braking point? Often referred to as Bob, beginning of braking. And if you join us to hear Peter Krause on Friday night at VIR, I'm sure you'll hear him talk about Bob and EOB, end of braking, where we come off the brakes and do we do that consistently. All of this is intended, of course, to keep the car balanced and to give us more grip and to make everything that much smoother. Now, vision. How do we see a corner? Well, the basic geometry says that, there's that 3 points give us a curve. But if we just kind of drive from cone to cone, like on the left, we don't really get a curve. So we have to mentally translate those cones, those reference points, into the smooth curve that you see on the right here. And when we have that mental picture, we have more confidence, and because in many cases corners are blind, and it just helps our mental frame of mind when we know what it's supposed to look like. Here's some other tips in terms of how to look when we're on track, and I'll say a little bit more about where in a moment. But you can think about 4 aspects of visions, one of which is the mental one we just talked about. But the eye and brain, as they work together, there are kind of 3 kinds of vision to think about. Focus, which is our main place that we're paying attention, but that's a small part of what we actually see. Most of what we see around us is seen with our peripheral vision, and a glance is using that focus, but quickly. Whereas focus really means we're exactly what it sounds like. We're looking at a point for some period of time. So to make that real, let's talk about being in the braking zone for a corner. And where do we want to use the different kinds of vision? Notice that the purple here that's at the apex is very small. That's because our focus area, the way the brain works and the eyes work, is small, about as big as your fist if you held it out in front of you. So in this case, where we're approaching the turn-in point, but still in the brake zone, we want to have our focus on the apex because that's where we're headed to next. We want to have our peripheral vision picking up the turn-in point, whether that's a cone or some other reference you're using. We're going to pick that up with the peripheral, but we're going to have glanced already before now and periodically, we're going to look well ahead, in this case, past track out, to make sure there's not a waving flag or something else going on over here that we should be aware of. And that just takes, a split second, literally, to get our eyes over there to pay attention. But this is an example in the, kind of as we approach a corner. Earlier in the braking zone, our focus would have been on the turn in, and we would have glanced at the apex and track out. Later in the corner, we would be using our peripheral vision for the apex. Our focus would be on the track out, and our glance would be down track. So some questions to ask yourselves about vision. many people find it useful to remind themselves, eyes up, look ahead, and ask yourself, am I looking far enough ahead? Am I really using my peripheral vision? Am I aware of what's going on around me? And obviously, do I have that clear mental picture of each corner? Now, that all plays into situational awareness, flags, traffic, track conditions, plus, what's going on with my car? What does it feel like? Is my speed, am I feeling speed that's different or something that's different than last time on this section of the track? These are all really critical parts of driving that don't have anything to do directly with the line or with braking or steering, but they're essential to be safe on track. And perhaps one of the most surprising parts of learning for student drivers is how much of actually learning to drive on track has to do with these factors, not, how fast can I drive the car, how well can I use the brakes, and so on. So passing, just a reminder of some basics. There are pass zones. We're going to cover those in a minute, only with a signal. Our passing rules are set up so both drivers know exactly what to expect. That said, the overtaking car really has the primary, or at least the most, responsibility, because that driver is the one who can see what's going on with both cars. If you have the mirrors adjusted properly, the car being overtaken should have an idea where the passing car is, but it's really on the passing car to make sure it's safe. The responsibility of the car being overtaken is to be predictable, stay on line, don't do anything sudden, and so on. So here's some questions to ask yourself about situational awareness. Have I ever been surprised by a car in the mirror? Is there a train behind me? How soon do I see each flag station? Do I check each one, even if there's traffic around me? Do I actually set up passing situations? If I catch a slower car, at the bottom of the climbing S's or in turn 4 at VIR, I have quite a ways before I'm going to get to a passing zone. There's no reason to be on that car's bumper. Fall back a little bit, let them drive that no passing area, and then you can close up on them as you exit into a passing zone. A really important question is how close to the limit, or actually I should say how close to my limit am I? And that applies in each corner. Maybe you're comfortable in doing things great in many corners, but there's a couple where you feel like you're kind of ragged. Well, be aware of that. And do I recognize an error? And do I use kind of a go, no go, switch in case something's not right? Do I know when it's time to bail out or slow down or whatever is required? And I mentioned the learning focus. This kind of goes without saying. You can prepare with written goals, but we need to stay focused in the moment when we're on track. We need to accept that we're going to make mistakes and turn that into a learning opportunity. And don't beat up on yourself. If you keep saying, well, gee, I'm really screwing up turn 1, don't say that. Say, I'm working on turn 1. I'm going to get it better next time. And talk to your instructor about how to do that. So these are just some kind of mental tips to help us all learn better. So with all of that said, summary of what we've just talked about, do the basics well and you'll end up having a great time on track. Here's what the basics are. And I'm sure that if those of you who've had experience on track know that some of these are pretty easy for you and some not so easy. And that tells you, gives you a clue as to where your focus and your goal should be, for this coming event at VIR. So with all of that said, you'll be able to find me at VIR, I hope, and ask me questions, but you can also ask any of the chief instructors and of course your own instructor questions about this or any other aspect of driving that you want to ask about. I strongly encourage you to print out the track map from a VIR that's on the website. and actually print out several of them and make notes on them when you come in from each section. If you're new to VIR, then print it out and study it so that you know the turn numbers and names. You'll see, at VIR, the names that you'll hear are, you won't hear horseshoe from very many people. You will hear NASCAR. You will certainly hear snake, which is the section not even labeled here, but this section here. And you'll certainly hear climbing S's, South Bend, Oak Tree, and occasionally roller coaster and hog pen. But the turn numbers are important to know for obvious reasons. So with all of that said, we're going to shift gears and we're going to talk about VIR turn by turn. So let me get that up here. Give it a moment to show up. Okay, here we go. So VIR, famous old track, long track. Our normal disclaimer of, use your own judgment. I don't have a passing zone map here, so let me just talk about where the passing zones are in student groups. The front straight is obviously a passing zone. All passing is on the right side. This information will be in the track pack, by the way, but all passing on the right side. There is passing allowed between 1 and 2, actually between 1 and 3 in this section here. It could be on either side. Most people are going to give a pass on the left in this area. Same between NASCAR and 4, between 3 and 4, passing on the left. These are short zones, but believe it or not, you can send a car around. The next passing area is the long chute, after the snake, before the climbing S's. And this passing is mandatory on the left in this section. So all passing on the left in this section. And certainly you can send at least 1 and often 2 or even 3 cars around here. The next passing zone is between 10 and 11. This is an awkward passing zone because the line crosses the track. So you'll want to work with your instructor on that. And then, of course, the main back straight is a long straight. All passing is on the left. All passing is on the left. Even immediately exiting where you might think, I want to give a pass on the right, don't do it. Track out, move the car to the right side of the track and give the pass on the left. We have the mandatory sides because if we don't do that, we've seen cases of drivers crisscrossing at very high speeds and it becomes very dangerous. Not a good idea. If you want to know more about VIR turn by turn, we have a complete written document on the website. It's hopefully pretty consistent with what I'm going to cover here, but please take a look at that as well. So we enter the track. You want to make sure you watch staging and pit out. They will let you out on the track. Pit, when we pit out here, we pit out right in the back in the latter part of the front straight. Cars are going a ton. We must stay all the way track right, all the way to the apex of turn 1. So speaking of turn 1, here it is, 180 degree plus corner. If you look, you will see that the front half is tighter than the back half. So it's a heavy brake and it's a slow corner. So the line is pretty much what you'd expect, except that we probably aren't going to use the full width of the track on exit because the track comes back. And so let's take a look at that. So here's the braking zone for turn 1. Guess what? It's downhill. There's not a lot of leftover track at turn 1 past the turn in point. So we really want to get our braking done early here. It's not a place to brake late. There's a little bit of help around the 2 marker where the track rises slightly. That'll help slow the car down some, but otherwise turn 1 is totally flat. There is no banking to help us. So it's a case where, again, the deck is stacked against us. It's a slow corner. We need to slow down. Here you see the turn-in arrow on the left, and that works for most drivers. And we want to turn and run right along the apex curb for quite a long distance. In fact, we just want to hug that curb all the way to the end of it. And the reason is that it's a long corner, and we have to get quite a ways around before we can think about getting on the gas to do anything more than maintain the speed that we have. So if we can't use any acceleration until we get to the end of this curve. Here you see why we don't use the whole track at track out. You can see that the track actually comes back after turn one. So it effectively makes this substantially sharper than a 180-degree turn. And so most people are going to track out mid-track and then look for and look up track to turns 2 and 3. So notice the direction of the slide here. I'm matching the track map. We've gone through turn 1, now we're coming back. So the line here goes from top to bottom of the slide. So the way we drive from the exit of turn 1 to the turn in at turn 3 is one arc. And you can see it's a pretty gentle arc, almost looks like a straight line on the slide. It's not straight, but it can be driven as an arc on the gas. This is a place where we can accelerate quite briskly, and it is a passing zone, as I said before, on the left. As we're exiting turn 1 and we start to head up the middle of the track, we want to be paying attention to these trees on the left. And it's hard to see here because it's kind of hidden by the trees, but the tech barn, which is the small building, as opposed to the tower building here or the food stand building, both of which are larger, we're looking for the small building. And as we come past the trees, now you can see it more clearly, but as soon as you see it coming through the trees, just drive right toward it. It's a perfect reference and puts us right where we want to be headed into turn 3. The apex of turn 2 is not critical. Some people stay wide and make the arc slightly wider, and some people just go right past the apex like is shown here. Either one's fine, but we want to get to track right entering turn 3. So the curbing we were aiming for when we were aiming at the tech shed is this right side curve that we want to run along. We're going to brake coming into this, and we want to run along this, and we're going to turn at the end of that curve for turn 3, also known as NASCAR. Relatively fast corner, but we've been going pretty quick. We've been on the gas. That's why we have to brake coming in here. So the brake zone, is before the car is in this photo, but we're still on the brakes as we approach the turn-in point here, and we're going to turn in right at the end of that curbing on the right, and we're going to run right along the apex of 3 for 10 or 15 feet. You're going to hear that on a number of corners. It's not, the apex isn't a point. It's a distance that we drive along. And you see we have a short chute in front of us that leads us over to turn, they call it turns 4A and 4B, left-hand turn being 4A, the right-hand turn being 4B. We compromise what we do in 4A to set up 4B in the section that follows. So we're braking for turn 4 because we can be on the gas hard through and through turn 3 and down the chute. And we're going to turn in, and instead of tracking out like you normally would, we're going to aim to have the car on the left side of the track here, or at least the left half of the track as we exit turn 4A. So in other words, we're going to apex the corner, but then we're not going to track out very far at all. We're going to go about 1 car length, at a car length and a half past the end of this curb, and then we're going to turn for 4B. So as we exit 4A, we're really focused on the apex here of 4B. This is really critical to nail this apex, because from this point here, about where the car is in this photo, we're going to turn the wheel to the right and make one arc that's going to take us exactly where we want to go through 4B and to set up turn 5. So here you can see the sealer patch in this photo, where the line is, right? It's creating that arc that is going to set us up for 5A and 5B. But 5A is the critical part here, as I'll show in a moment. So here's that little tiny chute where we're driving that arc. That arc is going to take us to the outside of the track here. We don't want to get, completely to the outside curbing, but we want to be up almost against it as we approach turn 5. Now we can see the apex of 5A here, and this becomes our focus. We may need to adjust the arc slightly, to get the car in there and to get it straight, as I'm going to show in a moment. Sometimes that means a breathe of the throttle or a little bit of steering adjustment, to make sure the arc is taking us where we want to be. The critical part here is when we're at the apex of 5A that you see here, we want to be looking at the bridge. It's hard to see in this photo, but the bridge that enters the track is in the middle of my highlight here. And we want the car looking at that bridge. If we're looking at the trees or to the left of the trees, we have not made the corner and we cannot get on the gas. So this is basically a heavy acceleration zone as soon as we get the car straight here. But if the car isn't straight, we can't get on the gas. And if we do get on the gas, we're going to be in trouble. So very important to get the car straight at this part of the track. Once we do, we can accelerate through the snake, and it's pretty straightforward. We do want to pay a lot of respect to the curb in turn 5B. It's a tall, nasty curb. If we hit it wrong, it's not going to do good things. The signature feature, or one of them anyway, of VIR, the climbing S's. And, turn numbers are sort of irrelevant here, but you can see it's a complex section. The key, or the way to make sure that you execute the climbing S's safely and quickly is the entry. And I'm going to emphasize how we do that in a moment. You see the entry line drawn here. So how do we do that? Well, as we approach the climbing S's, we've just gone under the bridge here that we talked about a minute ago. We're going to turn the car very gently to the left once we get to about the end of this road on the right ends. And we're just going to bend it. We're accelerating at this point. We're not going to brake. We're going to stay on the gas, and we're just going to bend the car slightly so that we can go straight along this curbing on the left. And I want you to pay a special attention to the white line and the fact that the white line is straight past the curb here. We're going to drive right along that white line. We're going to follow that white line. We're not going to turn until the end of that white line. And so that's about here in this photo. And the reason we do that is there's a hill on this next S. And if we do what we just described, we hit that hill square on, and the car feels good, lots of grip, we can be on the gas, everything's nice. If we're not lined up that way and we hit the hill at an angle, sooner or later, that's going to cause a problem, especially if we try to go too fast. So it's very important to get this first section done properly. Once we do that, this section is just a blast because we're going to apex kind of the end of this 8A curb that you see here, and then we're going to aim kind of the middle or second half of the 8B curb on the left, and then the middle of the curb on turn 9 at the top. There's a great rhythm through here, and it is very fast. which makes it both fun, but extremely challenging and deserves a great deal of respect. So immediately after turn 9 comes South Bend, turn 10, the fastest corner on the track, and in my view, the most dangerous corner on the track if it's not driven correctly. So how do we drive South Bend? Well, first, as we exit turn 9, there's a little bit of a rise, and then the road settles down, which is where the car is in this photo. As soon as the car settles down coming over that rise, we want to use the brakes. This is going to be somewhere between a brush brake and a light brake, depending on how much horsepower you have, how fast you're going. But the key thing here is we're going to brake in a straight line. We're not going to brake at all, after we turn in for this corner. So we want to get the braking done in a straight line so that when we turn in, which our turn in is as soon as we can see the beginning of the apex curb, we want to be getting our foot on the gas pedal, not on the floor, but we want enough gas to settle the car, and so that the car is settled and we can manage the line through the corner. This is a very fast corner. This is a case for slow hands to turn the car into a fast corner, and it's a case we're using light brake release and initially light gas to balance the car, get it set up, and eventually squeeze the gas pedal to keep it planted. The apex here is the early part of the curb. One of the nasty things about turn 10 is that it goes off camber, right where you'd like to have more banking at track out. And you can almost see that in this photo, that it does go off camber. So that catches people out if they're not paying attention. If we stay on the right line and we manage the gas properly, this corner is a lot of fun. If you ever do get in trouble, just drive it off. There's a huge field on the right here. There's all kinds of room to drive off. The mistake people make in this corner is they get in too fast or too early, and they, instead of driving off, they lift. And then you hit the tire wall that's over here, and you hit it hard. So, because you're going so fast here. So lots of room to drive off, a lot of fun to drive. Most people who make that mistake are not students, but that's why this corner deserves great respect. Now, another signature complex at VIR, Oak Tree, turns 11 and 12. And notice how the second half, turn 12, is tighter than the first half. So that means we can carry some speed through 11. We then have to brake to set up for 12 for Oak Tree itself. So we have a nice brake zone and into a hill. So we don't have to brake as much as we think coming into 11 because it is relatively quick and this hill is going to slow us down anyway. So we turn in, kind of at the middle or a little bit past the middle of the curb. The key thing here is to have the eyes up and focused on this curbing on the outside of 12, because we want the car lined up alongside this curb. And ideally, we're going to be on some brake here, not heavy, but enough brake to help the car turn, because this is a very sharp turn, very slow turn. This is a case of fast hands. Once we get to where we want to turn, we need to crank the wheel. This is a sharp turn. And we're going to crank the wheel and be patient to get on the gas because, again, it's a sharp corner. The car takes some time to turn, and we have to give it that time. The key thing here, by the time we're approaching the apex, like you see here, we need to be looking at this flag station. If we're still looking over here, then we haven't turned enough. If we're looking here or to the right, great. Now we can begin to feed on some gas and accelerate. This is an extremely challenging complex, but very rewarding when you get it right. Track out is the last half of the curve here. Okay, now notice again direction. Now we're going from the left of the slide to the right. This is, the roller coaster at the end of the back straight. And we're going to see another compromise corner here. We're going to compromise 14 to set up 15. But what does that look like? First, this is the braking zone at the end of the back straight. And notice the hill. Again, that helps us slow down. But the road does turn or bend, I should say, left, at the top of this hill here. And for that reason, as we get about to this point, we just gently turn the car, not much at all, and certainly not enough that should affect what we're doing with the braking. The reason we do that is we want to be on the left half of the track as we come over that little rise to set up our turn for turn 14. Turn 14, we're going to just basically follow this curbing. We're going to pick up the curbing someplace early on. We're just going to follow it, because when we get to the end of it, that's where we're going to turn in for 15. This is another slow corner, and we have to be patient. But the nice thing, if we do this right, we get to this point, we just turn and go. We turn the car to the left, we start squeezing the gas, and away we go, because this compression here you see in front of us when the road flattens out really sticks the car down. And yes, we're going to apex the middle of the curb, but at this point, we got a ton of grip and we can accelerate down this chute that's in front of us. Now, this chute leads us to one of the most important complexes on the track, because this sets up the front straight. And this is 16A, 16B. And what you can't see on the slide here is that the road falls away dramatically here. From the point of 16A down past 16B, we're going down a very steep hill. Feels like the car is falling off the edge of the world at this point. So here's the outside turn-in curbing, if you want to think about it that way, for 16A at the end of that chute. So we're going to need to brake, but what we want to do is whether we may begin braking before we bend the car in for 16A, but we want to brake all the way up into this little rise that you see on the left here. There's a little rise there that can help slow us down. And we do have to slow down to set this complex up. Basically, what we want to do is follow the last half of the curbing on the left here. And again, we're compromising this turn to set up the one that follows. So we're going to follow this curbing to the end, and then we're going to turn. And here you can get a sense for how steep the hill is that we're navigating at this point. So we're going to turn in to the right at the end of this curbing that you see in the slide. And here's what it looks like going down the hill. There's the 16B apex. We're basically on the gas at this point, depending how much power you have. We're certainly going to be feeding gas on coming down the hill. As we get past 16B, we can feed on a lot of power. We do get compression that helps us here, but the road does come back. So if you have a high-powered car, you have to use the gas judiciously here until you can make sure there's enough road to use it. In a lower-powered car, we can be using most of the power pretty quickly through here. And it is important, as I said, it feeds onto the front straight. I don't have a great picture of 17. One note about 17 is that there's no need necessarily to be in on the apex on the right. Many drivers find it's just as comfortable to be a car width or so off that apex. But the track out curbings here at 16B and 17 are not that friendly. So they're not places we don't really want to use the last inch on the outside of these corners. A terrifically fun complex, once we get it right. So just some notes to summarize. Turn 1 is slower than it looks. So is Oak Tree. So is turn 4. You might pick up a theme here. Turn 10, South Bend deserves great respect. And these connected corners, like the complex that begins at 4, like the one at the end of the back straight, like the one that feeds onto the front straight, they require patience. There's a reason why we want to set it up, because we're setting up the fast section that follows. But if we get impatient, then we're going to screw that up. The last thing I will mention is that I think I mentioned this briefly before, we are looking forward to having Peter Krause do kind of a virtual track walk Friday night with some snacks and drinks. And I hope you can join us there. I look forward to seeing you at VIR. And please, if you have any questions or comments, you feel free to look me up at VIR. Feel free to send me an email. It's Gilbert, the number 4, at rcn.com. Everyone have a great day. I look forward to seeing you at VIR.